Today I got to talk to somebody that I've looked up to for a long time, the 7-time world champion, Dan Mortensen. 6 times in the saddle bronc riding, 1 time in the all-around. We got to talk about the state of rodeo. We got to talk about life. We got to talk about his opinions about rodeo and where it's headed. It was a really good conversation, and I hope you enjoy it. I'm Wade Sankey. This is the Sankey Rodeo Show podcast from the cabin right here on the ranch in Sankey, America. It's not going to get any better than that. You just will go. Thank you for coming. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I appreciate the offer, and thank you.
Yep. Well, glad to have you on. So we've already kind of touched on what we wanted to talk about, but this isn't just going to be strictly a rodeo podcast. We want to learn about life before, during, and after rodeo as well. So the only reason I drug you into this is because I've known you for a long time. So this has allowed me to meet a lot of people in my life, and that's where I'm going to start with all this. But anyway, so what are you doing now?
Kind of enjoying life right now. I've got 3 kids that we're raising right now, my wife and I, and get to spend quite a bit of time with them. We homeschool, and I'd like to see them grow up and make the correct choices in their life and grow up to be something.
Yeah. And you really enjoy that.
I really enjoy it. Yeah. It lights up my life right now. And, rodeo is challenging, just being on the road and doing what you must do to commit to have a successful career in rodeo is very challenging on the home front.
Mm-hmm.
I really respect guys that were able to rodeo and have kids and raise good kids, and it's a commitment. It cost them. Didn't really cost them. I don't think they felt it was a cost, but it affected their rodeo career, what they were able to achieve in rodeo. But they put their values in the right order, and I respect that.
So how does the homeschooling deal work for you guys? I know there's so many people, me and Danielle have talked about it, but there's a lot of people that are looking into homeschooling now just because of the climate of the world. What's your homeschooling entail, and do you go through a service or system, or is it just on you guys through a school locally?
Well, my wife kind of handles it, so she was homeschooled. I feel she got a lot better education than I did.
Yeah.
I look back at school, and high school was probably the worst time of my life.
Mm-hmm.
When I look back you look at the highs and lows in your life, and what you enjoy, what you appreciate. High school was probably the low point in my life.
Yeah.
I think to a certain extent I might have been dyslexic or something. I didn't read very well and kind of got channeled into the kind of a different class, because I went from kind of I was good at math, and I was being in kind of an accelerated math class, and then I lacked in other areas of school and kind of got, how they just kind of say, okay, this is you're going to go to this lower level class, and we're not going to really try to make you read or teach you to read. You can just stay there.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to get out of that. So
do you think you're still dyslexic? Or
well,
were you?
I don't read I never read for pleasure. I read, just try to learn stuff. I constantly want to learn, and so I read a lot on the computer, but I don't read for pleasure and stuff.
Huh. I would have never guessed that.
And I guess that, I kind of stayed there. When I graduated from high school, I went to college down in Powell, Wyoming, and it was a totally different environment. I went from some of the years that I felt I did not like in my life to some of the years that I just had a great time. Yeah. Great environment, great people to be around, learned a ton, matured, and grew as a person.
Mm-hmm. So do you do stuff to socialize those kids? I mean, I know what you do. You do some 4-H.
We go to a co-op once a week. They're involved in the co-op. And that's where, other homeschool families come together. The kids, do some youth group stuffs involved with church. They're in 4-H, which they love.
Yeah.
Get to do a lot. So, I mean, there's a lot of opportunities. And again, it's who you're around and who you associate. You tend to be around people that you appreciate. You appreciate their values. You appreciate what their kids are.
Yeah.
And we can control that a lot more.
Yeah. Yeah. And so they get to learn. How about some parenting advice? This is something that I have wondered about a lot. Like, I think about parenting all the time, and all I know is that I don't know anything. But where I'm at right now is that the only thing I know that I can do for my kids is put them in the right climate around the right people to look up to.
Yep.
That's something we're super fortunate about here and around rodeo.
Yeah.
We can control who they're around, and for the most part.
Yeah. And I saw a deal the other day. I think it was on one of these podcasts. I watched just some clips, and it was talking about the way a individual turns out has more to do with who you associate with than it does like or economic status. Mm-hmm. Like, if you put yourself around the right people, your chances of success are kind of coming out what you want to be in life. Or me as a parent, I'm guiding my children in that direction, is greatly improved by who you're around.
Yeah.
I always saw that in rodeo. It was kind of neat, in the mid 90s, I was doing some stuff with Wrangler and went to the high school finals, and there's this whole group of kids from like Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, like a whole whack of them, 8 or 10 of these Bronc riders that were doing really good at high school finals. Mm-hmm. And that's from an area that doesn't typically produce Bronc riders.
Yeah.
But them guys all came up together, and they challenged each other.
Yeah. And
all of a sudden you end up with Cody Martin, Cody DeMoss, Heath DeMoss. Like, there was a whole bunch of them, Jeremiah Diffie.
Yep.
There's probably 10 of them guys, but they came up together. You see that a lot in rodeo, the South Dakota guys, when Chad Furley and Jeffrey Willard, and there was a whole group of guys that came up together. Mm-hmm. But the reason they were successful and reached the level they did, I believe, is because they were challenged. They were challenged, from the time they first started riding Broncs. And they came up together as a group. And I think that not only applies to rodeo, but that applies to life.
Yeah.
Anything you do in life probably channels that same.
Yeah. And another example is like you and Deb and Scott Redding and Clint, all kind of from the same area.
Yep.
That had to come into effect a little here, huh?
It did. And them guys are all a little older than me. I know that Clint and Deb went to school together at Powell, but they were kind of in that group ahead of me.
Oh.
But I really looked up to him. Yeah. Scott Redding was right in there. There was a whole bunch of guys, a lot of bull riders from like Big Timber, Brett Todd, Wade Lavoie, Mike Lenning. Like, there was just a whole group of guys that were a little bit older than me.
Yeah.
That, and when I was starting out, some of the stock contractors that put on youth rodeos and high school rodeos were just phenomenal. Mm-hmm. Dale Small and Small Rodeo Company, like, they were between Billings and Hardin, and I got to go out there and get on their young bulls. They raised their own bulls.
Yeah.
Roped them as calves, and I went out there and got on yearling bulls, and just one after another. I think I got on 16 head of bulls one day for them, but just, young ones.
Yeah. And
I was little. I probably weighed 70, 75 pounds, and took a loose rope, was pretty good in the chute. And so I think that had a lot to do with my upbringing, and then just having a good group of guys to look up to.
Yeah. You kind of talked about the socioeconomics of life. Well, we kind of talked about it before this, but like, you were really successful financially in rodeo and after rodeo. and you got to play for a lot of money. You won a lot of money, but you were pretty smart with it, and a lot of guys aren't. How come nobody does anything to try to help guys manage their money like they should, like you did? Or where did you figure out how to do that?
Well, I was starting from nothing. So, like, when, I mean, I went through college with no debt, you know, paid my own way. And, you know, I guess my rodeo paid for my rodeo.
Yeah.
You know, and I'm big about coming up through the levels. You know, I came up through my levels, started out youth rodeos, high school rodeos. When I was in high school, I got to go down to Cody quite a bit. Ike Sankey had the rodeo, but I'd go down there and enter them rodeos, and I was trying to do it and make money.
Yeah.
Because I had to.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't. You know, like a lot of people absolutely don't think about the economics and don't have to pay for getting to the next one or getting to the next level.
Yeah.
You know, on my level's always paid kind of for my next level. What I won down at Cody probably funded my, when I got into the NRA, which is a great amateur association in Montana. You know, it took me a while to kind of establish myself and become successful at that level. And I was able to pay for that with what I was winning at the lower level. And then, when I got successful at that level, I was able to put enough together to go to the next level.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of guys just don't, why there's not more people teaching that, they don't want to. I just think a lot of times they don't want to hear it. It's really hard to, I tried to do it even when I was rodeo and tried telling them guys, hey,
keep some.
Put a portion of it away, you know, put as much as you can, 15%. It doesn't matter, like, because right now everything's great. Like, you're on a hot streak, riding good, but everybody goes through that cold streak where you're not winning, and your mental toughness gets challenged more than anything. Being able to ride through a slump, but your checkbook plays a role of that too. There's many guys that went broke and had to go home. As guys that got busted mentally and had to go home.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's the guys that got busted physically and had to go home.
Yeah. But talking about the state of the PRCA, which we'll get to at some point, but yeah, if you could keep those guys around, you'd have more guys. But yeah. So did you have a equation? I mean, was it 15%?
No, I just
did you start a corporation and pay yourself out of that? Or you just managed it well, just paid attention to it?
I don't know. I don't even know that. I mean, I did get a good accountant.
Oh.
That kind of early on when I started winning in the PRCA. And, there's a lot of guys that were they'd go out and buy a bunch of stuff to avoid paying taxes. And my accountant was kind of the other way. He says, pay your taxes, put the rest away, go win, go make some more.
Yeah.
So I guess that was the kind of the approach that I took. So I just ended up investing a lot, putting it away. And fortunately, it worked out for me.
Yeah. So did you have a moment to where you realized, like, you had to pay it? I think everybody in life has had this moment where they finally made a little money and then went, well, shit, I got to give it all to the government. Did you have that? Or did you have
mean, I know the year I won the all-around and kind of the mid-'90s when I was doing really well rodeoing and had some really good endorsement deals. I was with DeWalt, one of the first guys signed with DeWalt, and had really good contracts with them after I won the all-around. And was winning quite a bit. And you have to pay a lot of money in taxes. So.
Yeah, but at that point you had an
that's why I care what the government does with that money that I'm paying them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what about the sponsor deals? That there was always sponsors, and you'll have to fill me in on this because I didn't pay that much attention then, but it seemed like you and Ty and kind of that era of guys were kind of the first guys to get major sponsor deals with major companies. Why do you think that is? Do you think that had to do with the changes of rodeo or the TV time, or was it just the personalities that were available then, or what do you attribute that to?
Well, I think it had to do with TV time and the exposure they were getting.
Yeah.
I know Wayne Herman had McDonald's.
Yeah, which is still
prior to
so
me.
Cool.
Like he wore the red chaps with the yellow arches on it, and
Yeah.
that's the one that really stuck out in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so back then there wasn't that many endorsement deals.
Yeah.
And I was just fortunate to be in that era where TV was playing there was more stuff getting on TV, and then them sponsors were getting interested, and then again just having the mindset of if somebody's willing to sponsor me and take a chance on me, I want to make sure they're getting their money's worth.
Yeah.
And take care of your sponsors. To me, it wasn't about having, back then, I mean, nobody did really, but I didn't want 10 patches on my shirt and try to satisfy all of them. If I could get one or two really good sponsors,
And then just
concentrate, take care of them, because they want you rodeo and they want you winning as well. Because if you're not winning, making the national finals,
yeah.
You're not getting them the exposure that they want.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think about the Cowboy Channel and the TV time and everything now?
Phenomenal. I mean, it's taken the sport to a different level.
Do you watch it?
Not much.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah. Is there reasons why you don't watch it?
I went to I've been to a lot of rodeos in my life, and my kids love it.
Yeah.
Like, we kind of limit television time.
Yeah.
So if you gave them that opportunity, they would just watch rodeo all the time.
Yeah.
They love it.
That's pretty
And
neat.
to me, I don't go to a ton of rodeos. When I do go to rodeo now, it's to see friends, to hang out with friends, more on a social deal. It's, I don't really have a dog in the fight, so to say right now.
Yeah.
And again, I think I don't know why rodeo, I just feel that they've lost a lot of the history and tradition and how they treat people, and a lot of rodeos that, because my name is known and I can probably still make an impact and sell tickets, then they want me to come and do a lot of promotion and stuff and sell tickets for them. And then as soon as they're done using you, it's like,
Yeah.
and I think rodeo's always been that way to a certain extent. There's certain things that have really stood out that kind of rubbed me the wrong way with how I was treated. That's the other thing. I remember that stuff. You should just forget about it, carry on, but there's only so many times that you're going to
Put up with it.
allow yourself to be put in that situation.
Yeah. Well, tell me more about that.
Well, just, one that points out, we went and did some stuff in New York City. They took Ty Murray. He was dating Jewel, Fred Whitfield. We went out there, did some stuff at the PRCA.
That was for the PRCA.
For the PRCA and Wrangler. And, they had hired a advertising company, and they wanted us to take saddles out there. So that's a pain in the butt. So I packed up a World saddle, flew it out there, and then they rented some horses, and we had to ride them through Central Park, and we're on one of the morning shows.
I kind of remember this.
And Fred was already there. He was doing roping demonstrations. And so Ty and Jewel and I went and got on these horses with some of the people from the advertising company and rode them through. And Ty thought, he didn't bring a saddle. He thought that was ridiculous to have to pack a saddle all the way out there. And Fred did. So Jewel rode Fred's saddle. It was kind of comical. Ty didn't have one, so they went and everything out there is English, So they went and found some old Western saddle upstairs and half-inch dust on it, and they knocked the dust off and just oiled it down big time. So it's like he had to step into it. And we get out. Anyway, we ride through Central Park, and it was kind of cool. We go out, we do the stuff, the media stuff. And
Had you ever been there before?
it's the first time. Never been there. And we get done, and the advertising people are like, hey, we want to ride the horses back. Because there's a bunch of them. And they're like, we want to ride the horses back. Are you all right with that? I'm like, yeah, I guess I want my saddle back, like make sure my saddle ends up at the room or whatever.
Yeah.
And they're like, all right, yeah, everything. So they step on their, by this time the PRCA people had left. Everybody with Wrangler had left. These guys step on their horses and take off. And we're just standing there like middle of New York City, and everybody left. Like as soon as they were done using you, they're gone.
Yeah.
I'm like, I don't know how to find my room. I don't know. This is before cell phones.
Or Uber.
Or anything.
Yeah.
And luckily, Ty and Jewel were there. And
Jewel had been to the city before.
yeah, so they knew where they were. And,
Yeah.
And they got me back to where we needed to go.
Did you get your saddle back?
I did get my saddle back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So didn't Fred have a kind of a bad deal there?
How is that?
Oh, I heard that. This is pretty much rumor, but I heard that. I thought it was during that deal he did an interview, and it had to do with Bryant Gumbel and him had fallen out or something.
Hey, maybe.
Or he was
I'm not
just
even sure.
extremely rude to him.
To Fred?
Yeah.
That could happen. It was kind of I don't know. I just didn't feel that we probably got took care of. I mean, just treated as well. And
Yeah.
I mean, it still happens today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, do you think that's rodeo, or do you think that's just the culture of
Both. I think it's both. I think it's more just a culture of today,
yeah.
And I don't want to. There was a rodeo, this is a couple years ago, and they have a Hall of Fame deal. And a good rodeo. Rodeo I loved going there, competing.
Mm-hmm.
And they contact me early in the year, and they're like, we want to induct you into our Hall of Fame. Would you be willing to come out here for this induction ceremony? I'm like, yeah. Like, I think that's cool.
Yeah.
Because you're getting recognized. It's a rodeo I really liked, enjoyed going to. And I thought it's something that for me, it would be neat for my family to go out and experience, maybe go to the rodeo.
Yeah.
It's a great rodeo, one I'd love to go to.
And it helps them.
It's out in Washington,
Yeah.
And yeah, I'll do that. Drive out there, whatever. So then a couple months later, so I've committed to it. And that's another thing. I mean, when I commit to something, I'm going to do it. And we were the same way rodeo. And Rod Hay and I traveled together, and we didn't turn out. If we entered a rodeo and we got set up where we could work them, we go. We never turned out.
Mm-hmm.
Because you just don't do that to your partner, number one.
Yeah.
And strand them.
Yeah.
And I think it hurts rodeo when guys enter rodeos and then don't show up. I remember as a little kid going to the Nile Rodeo in Billings 4 years in a row to see. We went the night that Donnie Gay was up. First 3 years he turned out.
Oh, really?
I went every night to watch him.
Yeah.
Because I was a bull rider back then. That was who I looked up to.
Yeah.
And I never forgot that. Like, I think that it's something that the sport needs to fix.
Yeah.
So anyway, back to this other deal. A couple of months later, I get a letter in the mail from the rodeo deal, the Hall of Fame or whatever, the induction deal. And they're like, well, we need you there for 3 days. You got to be there on a Friday. The deal is a week before the rodeo, so the rodeo is not even going on.
Mm-hmm.
And the tickets to the banquet are $100 a piece. How many do you need? And like just on and on. And it's like, okay, so I'm gonna drive out there, buy a motel room for 2 nights, spend 3 days of my time, pay $500 to go to their little banquet,
Yeah.
and all these demands, and it's like,
Yeah, and not even that you're looking for special treatment, but
No.
just a little give and take here would be great.
and they couldn't believe it when I went out there, but I went out by myself, and I called a couple stock contractors that I hadn't seen in a while, and I ended up taking Don Hudson with me.
Yeah.
Don and I went to this deal because when I went to Ellensburg, he was the main stock contractor, and I loved that rodeo, and we got on good horses. It was one of the first rodeos that brought in multiple contractors. Pretty much everybody had a shot, or your odds were
Better.
a lot better
Yeah.
that you were going to have a shot to do something. So I went out and enjoyed myself and got to visit with some folks, but and it was just one of them instances where, I just think I could have been treated a little bit better. And I think the closer you get to home, the more that happens, actually.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Well, here you sit, Dan, doing a podcast with me. But
I'm just talking about how when I go to a rodeo and how
Yeah.
I get treated,
yeah, no, yeah, 100%. I understand that.
They want you to come in and go do interviews for them and try selling tickets and promote their event, and then throw you out of the building because you're there too early.
Yeah.
Yeah, and and treat you and your family just horribly when you do show up to try to promote their rodeo and sell tickets for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just something that needs to be fixed.
Yeah. Well, I wonder, I kind of like finding solutions. I don't know if there's ever a solution to find from this. I mean, we're bringing some light to it, talking about it, but I wonder how you go about that. And I also kind of wonder if a lot of it doesn't go back to the contestants. I mean, rodeo is such a strange deal because the lifespan of the career is very short, and everybody's extremely young. And so everybody sees things from a young person's perspective when they start. They're 18, 20, 25 years old. How old were you when you made the finals the first time?
It was 1990. I was born in 68, so I was right about 21, I think.
Okay, so
maybe just turning 21 down there.
Yeah, I mean, everybody knows your perspective changes from a childhood to an adult, which sits right in the middle. But they want more money. They're very, very short-sighted from a contestant's career. And then
Contestants are, you mean?
yes,
Yeah. No, and I totally agree with that.
and the PRCA
Because
ran by
a lot of
contestants.
guys they're just worried about making enough money to get to the next rodeo.
Yeah,
And they don't look at the sport, from other angles. And that's something the longer you're around, the more you can do.
yeah,
And that's, looking at it from contestants' point of view, I mean, it's really a three-legged stool. You have the contestants, the stock contractors, and rodeo committees. And they need to put an event on that'll sell tickets and fill the seats. When you can fill the seats and sell tickets and bring exposure, then you can get the sponsors to come in.
yeah,
So, and trying to look at it from everybody's point of view. And I've always said this, probably the most constant of them three groups is the stock contractors. Because look at yourself, how many generations of stock contracting have you been involved in?
yeah,
Where especially rough stock contestants turnover. Committees, there's a huge turnover in committees, which is why I really like committees that have people on the committee that know what they're doing and have been that know the sport of rodeo,
yeah,
which, I hate picking committees out, but Red Lodge, for instance, the people that are on the Red Lodge, Montana Rodeo Committee know rodeo.
yeah,
There's guys that have been on that committee since I was in high school or young that are still, and they may not be on the committee, but they advise the committee.
Yeah, exactly.
And they make sure that that rodeo is looking at the sport in what I feel is a positive aspect, or
Yeah.
trying to improve it or hold it up to that standard.
Yeah, something I counsel committees all the time because I work for them. That's part of my job, and everybody wants to talk about growth. Growth is the most important thing in anything, in my opinion.
Yep.
But they say, well, none of us really rodeoed. We need to start this rodeo committee. We need rodeo people. Hold on just a second there. You need a well-balanced business group.
Yeah.
If you've got, what's a really good example here? Sorry, Deb, but I'm going to use you. If you've got 10 Deb Greenos on a rodeo committee, there's going to be some areas you're lacking. They'll have a badass bareback riding. They'll have lots of money to the contestants, great livestock, but that's it. And there's more to it than that. You got to market it. You got to sell it. You got to produce it. You got to hire the right contract personnel, Yeah. There's a lot more to putting on a rodeo than what most people think. But it also goes the other way. If you're working for a fair that has one fair manager that knows nothing about rodeo and all they want to do is get people to the rodeo, away from the rodeo, to the Ferris wheel, to where they can go make some money in the carnival, that's their business model, and that is the business that they're in. So that's understandable from their perspective, but doesn't mean that they're going to set up a hospitality tent or do anything for the contestants to make it more fair or better for them,
Yeah.
There's a lot to it.
And along those veins, same way, even looking at it from a contestant's point of view, there's a broad spectrum on the contestants' side of it.
Yeah.
I mean,
The calf ropers see it different than the bulldoggers, and the bulldoggers see it way different than the bronc riders.
Yeah. They, a good example, Bremerton, Washington, outstanding rodeo. Great committee. They won Committee of the Year all the time just because they treated guys so well. You show up there, they'll do your laundry, take it in, have it starched. They got chiropractors there. They got, they feed them guys 3 meals a day. Mm-hmm. Just, bend over backwards. But I'm a bronc rider, man. I roll in. I try to get there hour and a half before the perf, maybe 2 hours. I'm going to ride, and I'm gone. The slack there starts a couple days before the rodeo, and they treat these guys that way. They feed them, do their laundry, masseuse, chiropractic, all this stuff. They do it for like a week ahead of the rodeo. So one year I show up there, and every time event contestant in the PRCA is camping out in Bremerton.
Yeah.
And it's not a very big rodeo grounds or area. And I come rolling in. I'm up first perf. And they're like, I'm sorry, but we got some parking 2 miles down the road. Mm-hmm. For you rough stock guys to go park at.
Yeah.
And then you can carry your stuff or maybe they had a shuttle. They always say they had a shuttle, but usually what I found is that some committee guy's teenage kid was driving the golf cart, giving all of his buddies a ride, like joyriding around. And their shuttle very seldom actually picked guys up from where they wanted you to park and take you to the rodeo.
Yeah, a little hard to count on sometimes.
Yeah. And every year, I knew some of the people on that committee. It was a great committee. Randy Corley's grew up right there.
Yeah.
He had a brother that was like one of the main guys on the committee.
Yeah.
So every year they'd come and ask a few guys if they'd go sign autographs after the perf. Just, kind of for the committee, and I always did it. They'd buy you a beer, you go sign autographs for half hour, 45 minutes. You know, the bullfighters be there and stuff. And every year I'd do it, and they'd always come ask me. And they come up and ask me if I would do it that particular year. And I said, you know what? I said, and I was kind of beat up at the time, sore. I said, I just had to pack my Bronc saddle and rigging bag. And I know what they weigh because I get on planes with them, you know. So I'm packing probably close to 70 pounds worth of equipment. I said, I just had to pack it 2 miles to here, walking. And now I'm going to have to turn around. I'm going to have to pack it 2 miles back to my car. So I don't feel like going and signing autographs for you guys right now.
Yeah. I don't have the time. Yeah.
And they're like, guys are always wanting more and more as far as hospitality, but they're looking at it very one-sided from a point of view of somebody who's going to camp out there for a week.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not talking about the guy that's in and out of there.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I don't go to rodeos to camp out.
Yeah. Yeah, things that just get overlooked, which is where a contestant on the board might have helped.
Yeah. Well, actually, not only a contestant on the board, a rough stock contestant on the board that looks at it. And that's a point with the committees nowadays, is that they're stacked with team ropers.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not picking on team ropers, but they're stacked with team ropers.
Yeah, team ropers are going to look at the team ropers' benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, when they made team roping a full member status and approved that, within 2 years there was more team roping cards than all the other events combined, and the association changed.
Yeah. And the votes for Bremerton, for the rodeo of the year, for everything, it all became vote oriented, right?
Yeah. And I mean, them committees are going to cater to, which to me always, you know, they put so much effort or thought into winning committee of the year, when from my point of view as a rough stock guy, I know good rodeos. And I don't care if you're getting voted committee of the year or not. That is not the determining factor as to whether I'm going to enter your rodeo or not.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, back to the votes in rodeo. I kind of wanted to talk about the ERA as well. I know you weren't part of that.
It was after my time.
Yeah. But the PRCA is a member-driven association, and it's managed by the membership as well. And then the ERA gets started. And the way I see it, and we really laid them out there on the chopping block that year because we committed to go to all those ERA events. They actually hired Ike as the stock contractor, contestant, ERA liaison. If you can imagine, he was hired for his people skills. But all the stars in rodeo jumped on a bandwagon, went and put on these events, spent money like the contestants would spend money to try to get what the contestants wanted and expected the money to come in. So the way I see it is they took their same problems that they had as contestants in the PRCA and they moved them over here and they expected them to all get fixed. And believe it or not, it didn't work. Like Ike told me about a conversation that he had with Trevor Brazil about roping calves. And the gist of it was that they wanted to buy 100 head of roping calves when they were going to need 15 at each one of these events. And Ike said, can't do it financially. Trevor said, I'll buy them then. Trevor bought them. Not long after that, he called Ike and said, this deal ain't working. We got to do something about these calves. And I respect the hell out of Trevor. Mm-hmm. But that's just something that I don't think he'd ever had to deal with directly. Yep. And I don't know how familiar you are with the ERA or...
Very little.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know I mean, everything, the reason that we went and did that stuff was because they were talking about change in rodeo, and I still don't know that it actually brought any change to rodeo. I think some people say that it led to the ERA, or no, it was the ERA. It led to the WCRA, which is now kind of the feeder system for the American. And maybe it had something to do with the American, but I really can't track that, so to speak.
Yeah, I don't really know a whole lot about it. But I think like you said, they were trying to solve problems that have been in the sport for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember when we were rodeoing, everybody's always got the same bitches,
Yeah.
you know,
And
year after year. And I'll be talking to guys that rodeoed 20 years ago, same issues. You know, they just never have gotten fixed.
Yeah, that's something Ike always told me when I started rodeoing.
And Trevor Brazil, I respect a ton. Like, I think that guy has done more for the sport. I mean, he is right up there. I really respect Trevor. He's younger than I am, actually. And, you know, first time I saw him was at the college finals. And he just did it right. He's handled himself well. Won a lot but the reason he won a lot is because he worked harder and tried harder than anybody else, you know? So I think that's one of the stories. And it's a smart guy. And, but the fact that even when you get the right people on board, you still maybe not be able to solve the problems.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I think what they were trying to do, and we'll get to the state of the PRCA here and the state of rodeo, but what they were trying to do is they were trying to recreate the PBR model through an association.
Yeah.
Which you cannot do. And I think it goes back to having 20-year-olds voting when they're extremely short-sighted.
Yeah.
So
and education. I think, you know, when I first started in the PRCA, they used to have general membership meetings in Cheyenne where they'd bring a bunch of contestants in the room. And I went to one, and I was the kid that should not have been voting. Like, it was one of my first years.
Yeah.
But I learned a ton.
Yeah.
You know, that's something that the association probably needs to do a better job of, is educating. If you want to be a member in the association, I don't know if there's a test you need to take, or if you are required to watch some videos, but you should know a little bit about the sport and how to care for the sport and what we're trying to achieve as a sport. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, tell me more. Go on, because I think that you've thought this through a lot. And maybe...
And this is going back to some of the deal with, you know, the different administrations that you have.
Yeah.
You know, one administration running the PRCA is all about, let's get more events. Like, let's get pole bending and goat tail tying. You know, like, the more the better. It'll bring in more contestants. Maybe it'll sell a few tickets. Then, you know, the next administration is more about, and you see rodeo committees that way too.
Yeah.
You know, you can go to the rodeo committee. A committee that I always really respected was Calgary. They just did it right, in my opinion. But they knew what sold the tickets.
Yeah.
And they knew how to take care of a contestant.
Yeah.
And when you showed up there, like, they treated you well.
And they catered to the people that were paying the bills too.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it was a total package.
And you look at the PBR. I mean, them, you know, when the PBR first started, I remember listening to them guys laughing, a bunch of dumb bull riders. They don't know what they're doing. They ain't going to be able to accomplish nothing.
Yeah.
Well, they know that they have the event that sells more tickets than any other event.
Yeah.
Bar none, by far. There's more people that buy tickets to watch the bull riding than any other event.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Calgary ranks all of the events. They know which is number one. They know which event's number two, number three, and on down the line.
Yeah.
And they know what each event costs them to be there. They know the benefits, the costs, and they can shape their rodeo.
Yeah. And they're big enough to put their foot down
Yeah.
and say, this is how we want to do it, and this is how we're going to do it.
I do have to say, looking back from the sport in the 90s to where it is today, and I'm not going down, and I'm not going to the rodeos. I'm just looking as an outsider, as a fan, that enjoys the sport.
An educated fan.
That, I look at them winter rodeos especially. The way, what they're bringing in for stock, they're making it a riding contest. The winter rodeos, when I first started, were not a riding contest. They were a drawing contest. It was like, and not only the winter rodeos, like Cheyenne was a prime example. It's like you're entering a lottery.
Yeah.
They take 125 bronc riders. Everybody gets 2 head. And there might be 10 NFR horses there. They each get bucked twice.
Yeah.
Okay. And probably one of the trips is in the short round.
Yeah.
So they're going to be bucked once in the long rounds.
Which makes it more uneven.
Yeah. And, okay, so you got 10 NFR horses. But if you can draw one of them good horses, it's easy. Like, it's taking candy from a baby,
Yeah.
like. So it was definitely not a riding contest. Where now, you look at them winter rodeos, they are a riding contest.
Yeah.
All of them. San Antone, I used to hate that rodeo. Just, number one, it was a drawing contest and how they treated people.
Yeah.
And when I quit rodeoing, that was one of the first ones that had switched. And they brought in good stock and they treated people well. And, there was a committee guy, they had a hospitality deal, which I didn't really, I appreciate the hospitality deal, but it's not a deal breaker to me. I just want somebody to treat me, somebody on that committee when I show up, instead of chewing my butt and throwing me out the door because I'm there 2 hours before the rodeo and your doors don't open till an hour and a half before the perf.
Yeah.
But they appreciate that I entered their rodeo.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
So now, them winter rodeos are a riding contest. Your top guys win the money there now. Like the cream, it's way easier for the cream to rise to the top on an even set of horses.
Yeah.
Basically.
It's more even. I've been thinking a lot about
More
this.
even. So them guys, and the sport reflects it.
Yeah.
Say them guys are winning their money at them big rodeos. My day, there was a limit of 125 rodeos you're allowed to count.
Yeah.
Today in rodeo, you have to go to 25. That's a huge shift. Because if you're going to win all of your money at them big rodeos and they really, really count, and you're going to get on good horses and have a good opportunity to win at them rodeos, you better make them count.
So,
you're not going to kill yourself going to 125 rodeos a year, getting on 200 head a year in competition. That's what we faced.
And you might be able to rodeo longer, and
Yeah.
it might allow the next generation to come up.
And that's what them guys were trying to achieve with the ERA. And that's what it's the same thing we were trying to achieve during my time.
Yeah.
But you still have to give guys that are coming up a path and an
Absolutely.
option. And that's one of my issues with the rule book. If you follow the rule book, don't let them guys, them top guys, ride equipment that is clearly illegal and do stuff that is clearly illegal and not not call them on it, because if you're bringing young guys up that are following the rules, they're never going to beat them guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it needs to be a level playing field. But
Level playing field.
we'll get back to this because I really want to hear your take on it. But something that's really been bothering me is the qualifications for rodeos have changed a lot.
See, and I don't know where they are now.
Well, they had an event in North Dakota this year that nobody knew what the qualifications were. Being a couple guys were joking that we think that the qualifications, the guys, the 15 that got to go to that event, were the ones that liked the most inspirational quotes on Instagram, because it was just across the board. Who knew how they were going to get to it? And then there's always been talk about a tour. This is kind of getting in the weeds. I should finish my previous thought. But when it comes to qualifications, if one rodeo has to play by the rules, so should all the rest of them, regardless of how much money they're adding. Because that's how it is in the rule book.
Yeah, the qualifications should be laid out clearly.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a, them event is picking who they want to come.
Yeah, which affects the world standings.
Yeah.
And eventually the world title.
Which when Calgary, dropped out of the PRCA, they invited people to come.
Yeah.
They got to invite whoever they wanted to.
Yeah. Well, what about the PRCA not counting money? Like Calgary, for instance, or the American. I think only half of the American counts. In my opinion, that's the biggest bunch of bullshit in the world.
See, and I'm far enough removed. Does Calgary count now? Is it a PRCA rodeo?
It's kind of year to year, and it depends more on the rules that Calgary wants to use. And so they get to use different rules as well. Like, I'm not sure they have a spur out rule. They have different rules in the timed event roping or tie down roping.
Yeah.
But
I know the big deal was when the PRCA made team roping mandatory, and every rodeo had to have team roping. That was the deal breaker for Calgary. They said, we will not have team roping.
Yeah.
Which, that's another issue going back. Like a lot of them big winter rodeos didn't have team roping.
Yeah.
Houston didn't have. Fort Worth didn't have. Jackson, Mississippi. And when they made that mandatory, I remember going to Fort Worth that year. Every event, the prize money got dropped $7,000
to pay for the team roping.
To pay for the team roping, which they held a month before the rodeo at some arena 100 miles out of town.
Yeah. The
National Finals Rodeo. They have a contract. The PRCA has 10-year contracts they sign. When they doubled the money in the team roping, because the team roping wasn't a standard event. It was an invited event. They doubled the money in the team roping. There was a 7%, and they were on about year 3 of a 10-year contract, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And there was a built-in 7% increase into everybody's prize money every year.
Yeah.
They took that increase away from all the other events, reworked that contract where the final amount of money that Las Vegas events put in didn't change.
Exactly.
But they took the money, and at the time they're like, well, it's not going to cost the other events anything.
Yeah.
But we're going to double the money in team roping.
Mm-hmm.
It did cost the other events something because they took their 7% increase away from them.
Yeah.
For the remainder of that contract to make up for that money.
Yeah.
Now they're wanting to add other events. The National Finals is already sold out. They weren't bringing nothing additional to the table. Like, it's one of the toughest tickets in sports to get. And and it wasn't just the National Finals. It was all them rodeos. If you need to educate these guys, if you're going to add events, your piece of the pie shrinks.
Yeah.
To make up for them. If you're going to cut your pie into bigger or smaller pieces, so more people get pieces, your piece of the pie shrinks.
Yeah. And it's not just adding events either. It's how they manage those events. Like Cody back in the day, Cody used to be the best one header in the world.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the exact numbers on this, but one year the bareback riding paid more than winning a round at the NFR that year.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next year, they changed their timed event to being 2-header instead of a 1-header. And so their cattle costs increased by 100%. They doubled their cattle costs
Yeah.
to give everybody another one in the time events. And where'd they get the money from that? They took it out of the added money from everything.
Yeah.
And so it cost the time eventers money, but it cost the rough stock guys money too.
Yeah.
And so the year after that, I can't remember how much less it paid to win the bareback riding there, but it was significant.
Yeah.
And so every little thing
looking at
has
it,
effect on something else.
I mean, when you have a contract and that contract has a number value assigned to it or a dollar value, when you change stuff, that's part of the business aspect that people need to step back and look at.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Simple economics.
Yeah.
Which is hard to do when you're a 21-year-old kid.
And just worrying about winning enough to cover your checks from last week.
All right, real quick, we got to pay some bills. Got to say thank you to the Bozeman Stampede, Bozeman, Montana, August 7th, 8th, and 9th. You can go to their website to get tickets at bozemanstampede.com. I'm not going to lie to you and tell you I'm going to put the link somewhere, but I'll have somebody do it. So, bozemanstampede.com. Tickets go on sale June 1st. Okay. Rule book. What are you doing with the PRCA now?
I've been asked and accepted just a position to be on the grievance committee.
The grievance committee, that's what it's called.
Which to me is, if somebody files a grievance and it goes through the levels, they could ask me to sit in and my job is just to hear the case and rule, be one of the guys that rules. I mean, to me, it's everything I've heard so far has been pretty cut and dried. I felt like, and I know that there'll be could be some situations that get not as cut and dried, but you just need to follow the rule book and look at all points of view and make the correct ruling.
So I don't think a lot of people, unless you've been around for a long time, know that the grievance committee actually exists. First of all, how is it structured?
There's 10 members on a grievance committee.
Okay, and how does
there's one person that's the head of the grievance committee,
mm-hmm.
and the 10 members are kind of spread. There's committee kind of people from
committee members and contestant members
from across the spectrum of events.
Yeah.
There's stock contractor on the grievance committees, and there's business people on and actually a judge or an attorney who's actually a judge.
Yeah.
Is the head of the grievance committee to make sure that basically the law is followed.
Yeah.
Like they're trying to mimic like
a courtroom.
Like the Supreme Court.
You're
basically.
the jury, yeah.
Like you're going to hear, you just set your beliefs aside, hear the facts, and make the proper call.
Yeah.
As far as the facts of the case.
Yeah. So how do you get on the grievance committee?
It's just an appointment. I was asked to be on it and accepted the position, which
is
kind of like judges. I don't think it makes you a whole lot of friends, but I haven't had to hear anything.
Yeah.
That's been even remotely controversial, in my opinion.
Well, and it's pretty secretive too. I mean, I don't think a lot of people know. I don't think a lot of people know about the grievance committee. I really don't.
Yeah,
but
anything in rodeo, even the rule book. There was rules changed within the last year and a half, and unless we used to do that traveling down the road when we were rodeoing. the business journal that the PRCA puts out has rule proposals.
Yeah.
And there's always new rule proposals or changes to an existing rule proposed. And a lot of times we would be like, oh, this is interesting,
Yeah.
And it passed the time
Well,
when you're driving down the road, but it's something,
if you're
and I
gonna,
try to teach them kids that, like, when you're learning how to rodeo, you can break rodeo down to riding ability, the business end of rodeo, and the mental end of rodeo.
Yeah.
Kind of as a contestant. Probably the mental end is at least 40% of the equation. Riding ability is maybe 30% or less, and managing business is probably 30%
Yeah.
or less. Mental's the biggest aspect.
Yeah.
But that's, any of that is just the business end of it. Making sure you know the rules, how the rules should be applied.
Yep.
So if you feel you've been fouled on an animal, like,
You should know the rules.
you should know the rules.
Yeah.
What constitutes a foul? What constitutes a re-ride? All of that stuff.
Yep.
You should know the business end of it. Yep. Not only entering rodeos and making travel plans and making sure you can get to all of them, but there's that business end goes. It's a broad spectrum.
Yeah. Well, and the structure. I mean, the qualifications, like you said.
Qualifications. Knowing the qualifications.
Yeah.
Knowing all. I mean
Trades.
Yeah. And a lot of that wasn't even around when I started.
Yeah.
Like the trade stuff and it evolves, and they're trying to make it better for guys.
Yeah. What about the priority list? Does
Yeah.
anybody know how the priority list works?
Yeah. I mean, all that stuff.
Do you know how the priority list works?
Well, back in my day, they, everybody that entered a rodeo, if you entered as a buddy group, say if 4 guys entered, you got one priority number.
Yeah.
So you basically entered as one entity, but you're going to take up 4 spots in a performance.
Yeah, but how do you get that number?
They supposedly it's computer drawn. They just show everybody in, and
Yeah.
But then I've also heard the conspiracy theories where they might try 2 or 3 or 4 times to get that priority list the way they wanted.
Yeah.
And that's something that a guy, if it's handled on a computer down there, then who knows? I mean, there's other aspects where I know stuff is a little, and it's a totally different realm. So we could talk about that later. We can talk about that now. Just me as a contestant going up and looking at a draw sheet and saying, every good horse this contractor owns is out on a Wednesday. I wonder why. Oh, look who is out on a Wednesday. Look who's out Wednesday. And they got to draw at all the good horses. But the guys that were out Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, them horses weren't even, all of that guy's good horses weren't even scattered out. And that's just...
and that's not a coincidence on a Wednesday.
I'm just saying it's a
it
coincidence who was
100%. Yeah. If the director's there that day, probably going to be some good ones in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've known directors that would call a stock contractor up and say, look, I'm out. I'm entering your rodeo for this day, or I am out that day.
Yeah.
If you want to have a shot to take something to the NFR, they need to be out that day.
Yeah. Okay,
And it guaranteed happens. That's why I respect, and to this day I respect, not only stock contractors, contestants, but everybody in the sport. I like people that have the good of the sport in mind. That aren't out there trying to play the system and cheat, basically cheat. Or try to take advantage of the situation.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, it was always easy. And Ike never did that. There's a lot of contractors that never did it. There's actually the contractors that would do that were few.
Yeah.
But we knew who they were, and we just tended not to enter them rodeos.
Yeah. Well, it's way worse now.
It was pretty bad when I went.
Yeah.
I mean, I competed against a group that was in my event and there were just certain rodeos. There was no reason for me to, unless that rodeo had a lot of money where I had to enter it, I wasn't gonna. And I hate dropping names, but man, and the judges, when somebody's got a brother-in-law that's judging them rodeos and the stock contractors against you, the judges against you, they are they own a bar together. And then they're in business together and he's judging the rodeo and you're competing against this guy. There's only so many odds you're gonna stack up against you before you're like, I'm gonna go try my luck at this other table over here.
Yeah. So you're saying it's not the way it's supposed to be?
That's not the standard, though. I think that's part of the, even the grievance committee. It's to make sure that kind of stuff doesn't happen, or if it does, somebody can say, look, I want to file a complaint saying this shouldn't happen within the sport.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And I think the way most guys deal with it is just, I knew where, and this, I competed for 17 years professionally. And especially towards the end of my deal, I kind of had my rodeos set that I enjoyed going to. There were certain stock contractors that I enjoyed going around, and they may not have the best quality of stock even, but it was even.
Yeah.
They treated everybody the same. I felt it was a riding contest. They're enjoyable to be around. The rodeo is over. There was a lot of guys. I'd go sit at the stock contractor's trailer. A lot of the contestants would head to the beer stand. I'd go hang out with all the crew because that's what I enjoyed doing.
Yeah.
Sit around and visit, and didn't matter if I fell off that day or got on a piece of junk I enjoyed being around them people. Rodeo has a lot of great people in this sport. A conversation can get a little negative, but I think when you look at the sport overall, it's still, if I had to pick a sport out for my kids to be involved in and people to look up to, like figures to look up to, rodeo is still the best, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So I hate to sound too negative. There is stuff that needs to be fixed, but a lot of it was stuff that needed to be fixed 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And we constantly try to fix and improve, but it's still the best game in town.
Yeah. Yeah. So we got to clean a couple of these things up here. So the grievance committee, in order for something to get to you guys, like let's say I get a fine from the PRCA and I say, no, I didn't break that rule. And so I
File a
start
grievance.
the process to file a grievance, yes.
Yeah.
And then correct me if I'm wrong here, but if it's a legal situation, which I can't think of a good example right now, but if it's clear cut and dried that I broke the rule, it doesn't go to the grievance committee. Is that correct?
Well, it's all laid out in the rule book. There is a section on grievance that I've read through. There's some things you're not allowed to grieve.
Yeah.
A judgment call.
Okay. Yep.
Like a spur out.
Yep.
Or when you give the judges authority to make a judgment.
Yeah.
Like a score.
You got to back them. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Like you can't grieve. I was 75 points and thought I should have been 80.
Yeah.
You just can't do that.
Yeah.
Or spur out or certain stuff.
Yeah. So I got to say this. Do you know how long it's been since I've seen a rule book from the PRCA in the current year of that rule book? And I haven't seen one on paper for years.
It matters.
It absolutely matters. But
Because
if you
the
look it up right
rules
now, the PRCA doesn't have
change.
the 2025 rule book listed.
Really? Say I don't have nothing to do with that, but it matters because when the rules change,
rodeo changes.
It matters.
Yeah, 100%. So what about the rule changes? What about...
So back to your grievance deal. Somebody can file a grievance.
Yep.
It goes to head of rodeo administrations, under my understanding. First place, and I think it's even listed out in here in the grievance procedure. It goes to head of rodeo administrations. He looks at it. And that's where most of the stuff that was clear violation. You broke the rules.
Yeah.
Just kicks it out.
And
or it was a judgment call, kicks it out.
Yeah.
Like that's just like, hey, cut and dried.
Not worth. Yeah, we got to back them. We got to do what we got to do. But head of rodeo administration is basically the lawyer for the PRCA, right?
I don't know.
He's not the lawyer, but he's the one that, like, if anything bad happens in rodeo, it ends up on his desk.
I know.
Well, that's his job.
Yeah.
And it's changed several times. But
right now, Steve Knowles is the guy that's head of rodeo administration, and I have a ton of respect for Steve Knowles. I've known him my whole career. He was a judge. He's from Florida, one of the nicest guys you ever met. I respect him. I don't know that I respected him as a judge. I tried, and that was our other deal. I tried not to go and look at judges' seats.
Yeah.
Especially at the national finals. Like, because it's so easy to get caught up in the head game of fighting your head over judges or how they're marking. Go out and do your job. Let the chips fall where they may. Move on. So Steve was a judge. I never thought poorly of him. He's a judge.
Yeah.
And I tried to never rank them judges. They're there to do a job. They aren't compensated very well. They're doing it because they love the sport. Treat them with respect because they deserve it. And they're just one of the guys.
Yeah.
Is the way I always approached it.
Yeah. And that's we better not get on judges.
So that's my opinion. Like, I have a lot of respect for Steve. He's head of rodeo administrations. He can pass a grievance on to the CEO.
Yeah.
The CEO can rule on it one way or another. And our CEO right now happens to be a lawyer.
Yeah, which I think is great.
That, again, I think it's great, but it shows the country as a whole.
Yeah.
Like, you can't hardly be the president of the United States without being a lawyer.
Yeah.
The amount of lawsuits that are getting thrown around and just I hope one of my kids ends up being a lawyer just because I think that's the way the world's going.
Well, you're always going to have a job for sure, yeah.
And just to protect the family.
Yeah.
And it shouldn't be that way, but it is.
Yeah.
And then the CEO can pass it on to the grievance committee, and that's where it's ruled one way or another.
Yeah.
And I guess a lot of times lawyers get involved and they come lawyered up and stuff. I've never seen that. And every case I've heard, the contestants have been respectful. They felt they were grieved. We made a judgment on the deal. Everything was handled. Everything's been black and white. And, we made a judgment, and I thought the PRCA handled themselves well. I thought the contestants handled themselves well. So
yeah. So basically, the grievance committee is the final complaint department. Yeah. But what about that rule book? What's bugging you?
Nothing, but it is what it is, and it's not just the PRCA, but if you're going to have laws and rules, abide by them, follow them. Because the guys that are trying to follow the rule book should not be at a disadvantage to those that are breaking the rules.
Yeah. people asked me, some bronc riders called me last fall and said, what do you think about this sticky rosin? They wanted my opinion as a stock contractor. And I said, I don't care. I mean, I do not care, because as long as it's an even playing field and everybody can use it, that's fine. Now, if they're...
But they were breaking the rules.
Well, yeah, they're breaking
at the time.
Yep, they're breaking the rules at the time. But they just wanted my opinion. And it was, if everybody can do it, that's fine, as long as it's an even playing field.
Yeah.
And that was the problem, was that some people were using it, some people were not, some people don't want to use it. But if they're enforcing it sometimes, but not all the time, it's just like we go back to the qualifications for the rodeos or anything else. And something else I told them was, if you guys worried about sticky rosin, you better let them have the sticky rosin so they don't get their tape measure out and go to checking saddles.
Well, that was the other problem. I mean, the saddles were not legal.
Yeah, but nobody knows how to measure them. I've built some saddles. If you gave me a tape measure, I don't know that I'd know exactly how to build it without taking the leather off of it.
Well, you allow a 1/2 inch for leather on each side. So, I mean,
yeah,
I've had it explained to me. I went toured with 4-H with my kids the other day. We went and toured a saddle maker's shop, which to me, that just fascinates me, craftsman, artist, beautiful, beautiful stuff. Somebody who can, and he makes his own trees. Like, he takes from blocks of wood and cuts the wood out, glues it together, makes a tree, covers it in rawhide, builds a saddle.
Yeah.
Just beautiful. So I visited with him a little bit about the trees, and just, his only point was, he's building trees for horses, and what the trees in rodeo had evolved to, because they were trying to follow the rule book and specifications, that the trees were being made for the cowboy and not for the horse.
Yeah.
Which, and it's only on the horse for a couple minutes or whatever, but
yeah,
still, when you go back to tradition and history, the old time, and even the evolution of saddles through my time, from the severe, where you kind of ride on top of that saddle, and the saddles just kept getting bigger swells, deeper seats, to where nowadays you're definitely riding in a saddle. You're not on a saddle.
Yeah.
If you're on it, you're thrown off.
Yeah. And they're so much higher, just how they sit. Yeah. I mean, you're hiding behind your swells.
Yeah, and the swells. But they finally did go in and clean up some. I think a lot of that had been neglected with previous administrations in the PRCA. Mm-hmm. And that's what I do respect about, the Tom Glaus is he went through this rule book. My guess is, I don't know, I haven't ever talked to him, but I think he went through the rule book looking at it from a lawyer's point of view and said, that rule doesn't make any sense. It would never stand up in a courtroom. What do we need to do to fix it?
Yep.
So I think at least they're looking at this rule book with the approach that, okay, if we're going to have a rule book, let's go ahead and use it and abide by it across the board.
Yeah, make it the same for everybody.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Just tell me what the rules are. We'll follow them.
Yeah.
Move on.
Yeah. Seems simple. So what do you think about the direction and the standing the PRCA is in right now? And you don't even have to compare it to when you were rodeoing.
Well, I'm looking at it as such an outsider right now, but
educated.
And I had a couple bad experiences here in the last couple of years, which kind of rubbed me the wrong way. But it was more on a contestant end, and I'd always go down to Powell and help out. I'd go down to their bronc riding practices, and just try to help them young kids, get them started. I love going down to Cody still, to the Cody Night Rodeo, and watching the young guys come up, the next generation, because that is our sport. Okay.
And
I'm more concerned, and I get more enjoyment out of watching the next crop than I do watching the current crop. And saying that, I traveled with Rod Hay, and I got to see his boys come up,
yeah,
to be what they are. They're kind of the top guys now.
yeah,
Or that Zeke Thurston, or I rodeoed with TJ Newman, Sage's dad,
yeah,
when I was in high school. So, I enjoy seeing that. But what the sport of rodeo is, the people involved, and I've always been impressed. Again, we talk about tradition, history, but a lot of that has to do with respecting the sport. Not trying to take advantage of, but respecting the people that came before and all of it.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had a couple of bad experiences here lately and it kind of ties back to this, the rule book that you're talking about, where guys were clearly cheating. In my opinion, their equipment was clearly wasn't even close to meeting the standards of the rule book. And the rosin they were using was, the rule was dry rosin only. They're using liquid, sticky stuff, gluing themselves in. And I mean, these are young kids coming up that I drove all the way down there to help them, out of the goodness of my heart. And they're like, well, you're just too old school. You don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, really? Like, I just drove like 2 hours down there,
yeah,
to help you guys. And you're going to frickin' sit here and lecture me. And their point was, well, everybody's doing it. They just need to change the rules.
yeah,
And my point was, well, you shouldn't change the rules to suit the cheaters. You should change the cheaters to suit the rules.
yeah,
And it's the guys that aren't cheating is who I was looking out for.
yeah. The people that follow the rules
Because
are the ones
there's
that get
more
punished,
people,
just like everything
there's
else.
more young kids out there trying to come up, and that I want to help, that aren't cheating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to compete against. And I go back again, like when I rodeoed. If I enter a rodeo and show up, and I go and look at the draw, and it's like, this group of guys was out yesterday. Every good horse this guy owned was out yesterday with them guys. And today we're looking at all colts or tryouts or young stuff nobody knows.
Yeah,
It's like, didn't break any rules,
yeah,
but like I might go enter some different rodeos.
yeah,
And we did. Like
Yeah.
that's the knowledge you gain being there, doing it, having done it.
yeah. Money,
Money in rodeo,
yeah,
they're riding for a lot more, but it's a lot more expensive.
yeah,
The cost of fuel, the cost of everything has gone up. So
Do you think?
the bigger the better. I love it. I think guys should be able to retire out of the sport of rodeo.
Yeah, yeah. Do you think with more money should come more responsibility?
Yeah.
As a sport,
As a sport. On what end? Like on the contestants' end? On like what are you talking about?
as far as representing the sport. So the reason that Trevor is everybody's favorite is because he's such a great representative for the sport, right?
Yeah. I mean, Ty did too. Ty won a lot. Ty had great contracts. Ty tried harder than everybody else.
Yeah,
I mean, worked harder.
yeah. But these
Put
guys,
more effort in.
yeah.
That guy, we go to the NFR, you walk into the bull riders locker room, there's 2 or 3 guys out, everybody's sore. You go to the bareback riders locker room, everybody's really sore. Couple guys out. Bronc riders, we had it the best, and everybody's still. You get on 10 of the best horses in the world, 10 nights in a row, and Ty, he's just strolling along, getting on all three,
Yeah.
and never whined, never, just went in and did it.
Yeah.
And people at the time, they thought he won too much or criticized him. I hear that nowadays with some of the guys, but he deserved it. The reason he did is he deserved it.
Yeah.
And looking at, like we're talking about the draw, it's not always the contestant's fault. Like, them contractors know, if I want this group of guys to show up to my rodeos, like, my best option is to just load that perf whenever they're out, load it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to keep entering my rodeo.
Yeah.
My rodeos.
Yep. Yeah. So
you can't blame the guys necessarily,
no.
because they're just going to go where they're winning the money.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I got to talk about is black tie.
Yep.
The black tie. I mean, I just speechless about black tie. Still can't believe we own him or raised him. But the coolest thing about black tie is I listened to a podcast yesterday that Zeke did, and Zeke said he got on X9 Explosive Skies 5 times, the only year she was a saddle bronc all year long. Black tie has drawn, other than the NFR, has only ever had 2 NFR guys get on him during the regular season. He's always been like the lucky rabbit's foot. But I just think that that's really cool, and it kind of goes back to how we do some stuff. Like the way Ike did it and the way I still try to do it is I don't make sure black tie's got an NFR guy every time, like, because it makes it uneven. And so if anybody can win on that horse, that makes him a better horse. But for the next kid coming up that gets to get on him, that's just like, that's a layup. Should be, if you do your job, But I think that's something that's always been really, really cool about that horse.
And that's, I've always respected Ike. He's raised a ton of great horses.
Yeah.
Like, in my career, and I got to see a lot of them. I mean, just down the list.
Yeah.
Ike always spread them out, and they weren't catered. I mean, they weren't babied.
No.
I guess they did. They earned their keep around this hub, and I actually got into it with another stock contractor one time, who was saying that, and it was over schizo. He's like, "Well, he doesn't buck that horse. That horse was out 10 times last year," and it was the year she had won the halter. I'm like, do you know Ike Sankey? Like,
This is for profit.
his horses get bucked.
Yeah.
He's not, and some contractors do that. Some horses maybe only can take 8-10 trips a year.
Yeah.
But so I think it's cool. That's, you guys raise great bucking horses, and I've always respected the way that Sankey Rodeo has handled. I've just respected them as stock contractors.
Well,
And the stock they raise, and I think they're doing it for the good of the sport of rodeo. Number one, they take wonderful care of their stock. They raise great stock, and they're fair. They don't load perfs. And I don't know if it's because you have that many good horses that you have the ability to spread them out. Because some guys don't have enough to spread them out overall. But I mean, I remember going to some, and not to pick on, Grounies have had great stock over the years. John Grouney, which now Tim Bridwell owns that card. But back in my day, it was John and Donnie Kish. I loved going to their rodeos because they were riding contests. They didn't try to favor anybody.
mm-hmm.
They were enjoyable people to be around. They treated everybody with respect. Their rodeos were fun.
Yeah.
And a lot of them were in California.
Yeah.
Like,
Which are fun rodeos, though.
They were outstanding.
Yeah.
And the committees were great. And when you showed up, them committees, all of their rodeos, even, Walla Walla and Canby, Oregon, and all them rodeos in California, when you showed up, them committees, and they didn't have to do anything but just walk up and say, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Thanks for entering our rodeo. And Bremerton was one of them. In Bremerton, I love that committee. But they went and I think they corrected it after I visited with them, that committee that year. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
and to their credit, they're like, we didn't expect this to happen. We didn't expect there to be not a single parking spot for a contestant. And they said it's not just the rough stock contestants. We're having an issue with spectators. Like, we got to have a place for them to park too.
Pretty important.
Pretty important.
Yeah.
So back to just fairness, and I don't know what the secret sauce is on all that, but it is the combination of everybody.
Yeah.
The stock contractor, the committee.
Yeah.
And if your stock contractor and committee can put on a great event, they're going to get the guys that are in the sport for the right reasons to show up and not be turning out.
So I got to say this on our end of things. An example is I had a younger rough stock guy called me this year and asked me if I'd, didn't like the draw that he had. And he said, is that horse feeling okay today? Listen, we're not going to have this discussion ever. You do not ever ask me that. And here's why. Is because every time you do something to help somebody in rodeo, you screw somebody else.
You're screwing the other guys right there.
And that's exactly why that's why we do stuff as Sankey Rodeo the way we do it.
Yeah.
And as far as our horses, the more we buck our horses, the better they are.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And looking at it from a stock contractor's point of view, to me, and it's got to just kill you guys, but it irritates the crap out of me. When you got your best 4-year-old prospect out and he draws the wrong guy.
That's hard sometimes.
And going back to this respect deal, I went down to practice there, and this kid was whining about this horse he was going to have to get on in the practice pen, mind you. Horse wasn't very big. Didn't want to get on him because he was so little. Said, he's a bucking horse. Get on him. And that horse turned out of there and freaking got it. And about 3 jumps, he had this kid throwed off. And this kid reached down and double grabbed and jerked that horse's head up. And taught him not to do that.
Yeah.
That's how you teach a horse not to buck, is to go two-handed and jerk their head up and teach them, oh, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
And I was mad. And he said, well, I was getting thrown off. I was just trying to save myself. So, well, if you're unwilling to hit the ground, you need to quit riding broncs.
Going back to the culture and going back to the history and the respect.
That is not how bronc riding is done.
It's got to be cowboy. That's a fact.
So looking at the sport from that way too, and I've even seen it at a big rodeo. I was sitting in the rodeo office watching them draw a short round. And actually it was Rod Hay and I, and there was a stock contractor in there, and they had a horse that they had to switch back and forth that couldn't take a pulling. It was an awesome horse. I've won around at the NFR on that horse. But if you put the wrong person on it, it's 2 years back to the bareback riding.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that contractor said, if so-and-so draws that horse, it's crippled. And Rod's like, why would you say that?
Because that's the one you're going to get.
Don't do it. And sure enough, it happened. And right there, horse is crippled. Said that's a $500 fine. I don't care.
Is that in the rule book?
Yeah, if you can't cripple a horse.
But it's in the rule book.
It's in the rule book.
Huh.
But they did it and took the $500 fine.
Yeah.
And it probably, and I look back and that's one of them situations where And I kind of was on the stock contractor side because
There's
that
a-
person that drew them
There's a lot of factors
is
to it.
hard on horses.
Yeah.
That's where, in the one instance at them winter rodeos, Houston, you know, when they started to improve, they made it a 3-header and cut back on the number of entries, and they had one go around that was all colts.
Mm-hmm.
Survey would bring all their colts in and buck them, and half the contestants hated it, and the other half loved it.
But it was even.
It was even,
Yeah.
and it eliminated. There's a lot of people that couldn't
Yeah.
handle a colt,
Yep.
couldn't handle their rein,
Yep.
couldn't get along with one.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, it was a great equalizer. I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it pretty much, and mentally, they were eliminated even without the draw,
Yep.
just because they hated it. And it was a huge rodeo, but, and it allowed the better horses to go to them other 2 perfs, you know?
Yeah. Which made them more even.
Yeah, which made them more even.
Yeah.
Like, to me, it was just a great equalizer.
Yeah.
And you should be able to, in my opinion, you should be able to ride all types. But that's the way I was brought up. I mean,
Yeah.
I got brought up when I very first started, was getting on a bunch of, the few practice horses I did get on weren't really the kind that you'd want to get on. You know,
Yeah.
until I went to college and actually got around and actually was, you know, Ike was the coach
Yeah.
in Powell when I learned how to ride Broncs, and he had the Cody Knight Rodeo, and we had 100 head of horses in
Yeah.
a practice pen, and that's where I learned how to ride Broncs.
Which also involved a bunch of colts.
But they were good,
Yeah.
you know. And Rod Hay was going there at the time, and I learned just as much. I learned a ton from him. I learned a ton from Ike.
Yeah.
And I got to get on a ton of horses.
Yeah.
And Ike, he didn't really buck that many colts in a practice pen.
Yeah.
But the ones he did were good.
Yeah.
I mean, and he knew what he was doing. And most stock, I mean, not saying stock contractors that are raised in bucking horses don't know what they're doing. Like, especially today, you find very few horses that weren't actually raised to be a bucking horse.
Yeah.
And if you're a PRCA stock contractor, you know what you're doing. So,
Yeah. And they didn't stay
Otherwise,
colts
you're
very long
broke.
around Ike.
yeah.
Well,
and I mean, if you're not raising good colts and you're a PRCA stock contractor, you're not going to be around very long. You'll
Yeah.
be gone.
Well, unless you can afford to keep getting them.
Yeah. Which then you're just doing it as a hobby
Yeah.
and you're funding it from somewhere else,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which happens, I guess. But
that's true. Well, you ever think about being the best bronc rider ever?
I don't think I was the best bronc rider ever. I mean,
Well, that's what
even
the
at
buckles
the-
say, though.
even at the time, I think there was guys that rode better than I did.
Yeah.
But it's not all about the riding.
Yeah.
You know, I struggled, especially learning. You know, it didn't come easy. I struggled. I tried to handle the business end of it, tried to handle the mental end of it, and it just, you know, I was blessed. I won 6 gold buckles in the bronc riding, and you know, a lot of stuff had to fall right for that to happen, and it did. And I don't think I ever felt I was the best. You know, when you're getting on one, you kind of have to approach it like, if I do my job, then I should win first. But I also watched the guys that rode around me, and I realized how talented and the ability of them as well.
What about the level of guys now versus the level of guys then?
Phenomenal. I mean, bronc riding's great,
Yeah.
you know, but, and I heard a deal the other day from, it was some kid, and he was just saying, well, the guys, they asked, there was a question on the sticky rosin, it had nothing to do with me. He's like, well, it doesn't matter because the guys nowadays ride so much better than they used to, that the rosin has nothing to do with it. And that irritated me a little bit, hearing that. Number one, the saddles that they're riding are a totally different beast
Horses are different.
than what I rode. The horses are different.
Yeah.
You know, them guys aren't having to get on some of the stuff that I had to get on.
Yeah.
But the guys ride phenomenal.
Yeah.
I mean, I enjoy watching it. But there's still, there's always a handful that kind of really stand out. When you watch the finals, there's usually a handful that are kind of at the top.
Yeah.
And so much of it's a mental game. I mean, when stuff's working and rolling for you, like, you just ride better. So I enjoy, bronc riding's still my favorite event. I enjoy watching good bronc rides. I enjoy watching good broncs.
Yeah. What about bull rides? You watch bull riding at all?
I do. It's crazy. Them bulls, it's unreal.
Yeah.
And I rode bulls for probably 12 years. But when you're riding them, like, you don't watch. I don't think you watch some of the stuff. You're certainly not watching with the same mindset as what you do when you are not riding bulls.
Yeah.
And that's what, because I rode bulls all through college. I was like three times high school state champion bull rider. Got recruited to college as a bull rider.
Yeah.
By Ike, and learned how to ride broncs in college. But then when I graduated from college, I actually quit riding bulls, and it wasn't intended to be forever. It was because I was trying to make a push that year to qualify for the NFR and the bronc riding. And my bronc riding really went up a level, and I attributed part of it to not getting on bulls. I wasn't sore all the time, so I was giving my body an opportunity to compete less beaten up.
Yeah.
And concentrate just on the bronc riding.
Yeah.
And then 5 years later, I ended up getting on bulls again.
Yeah. What's the story?
To win the all around. And I got on. I mean, when I was in college, I loved it. You just crave it. Like, you're bulletproof. You're invincible. When I got on them 5 years later, that was definitely not my mindset. Because I had watched way too much of it.
Yeah.
And
thought about it.
And thought about it way too much.
Yeah.
So it was a whole different mindset.
So did you get on any practice bulls?
No.
And how many did you get on?
I got on 7 bulls that year and rode every one of them and placed on 6 of them. And actually, the last 2 rodeos I entered was Moses Lake, Washington. I split first there in Flying Fives pin.
Buckers. Scary
and
ones.
The last rodeo I entered was Walla Walla, and I won first at Walla Walla on a little Donnie Kish cool spinner.
Did you think about it?
I did. I got on some the next year, and it didn't go as well.
Oh, okay.
It wasn't meant to be.
Yeah.
The reason I did it is Ty had been injured there 3 years in a row.
Mm-hmm.
That was the 3rd year. The 2 years prior to that, the guy that won the all-around, I had more money won in the bronc riding alone than he had in the all-around.
Yeah.
So it just made sense. And part of it had to do with sponsors. The sponsors actually a sponsor came to me at the time and said, "We want you to get on bulls."
Boy, that's a lot to do for a sponsor.
We heard you ride bulls, and we think it'd be really cool if you tried winning the all-around.
Yeah.
And actually, I had an agent at the time, and she brought me a deal, and it's like, if you get on bulls, they'll give you this deal. If you qualify for the all-around and end up in the top 5, you get this deal. And if you win the all-around, you get this deal. And I always tried to look at the business end of the sport, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll consider that. And it worked out. I ended up winning the all-around. I got a really good 3-year contract.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
That's so cool. Does it shock you that you rode them that good?
I don't know. I was just, looking back, I'm like, I was just that scared. I didn't want to hit the ground. Because number one, I was pretty picky what rodeos I entered.
Yeah.
What herds. Mm-hmm. And I knew them because I rodeoed, I was going to 200 perfs a year
Yeah.
competing, so I knew what herds of bulls were out there. So I knew where to enter. And a lot of it was just luck. Like I just lucked out, drew good bulls,
Yeah.
and yeah, God was looking out for me.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But that's so cool. I've never heard that story up close and personal. That's a pretty neat deal. I mean, to get the biggest title in rodeo.
Yeah.
That's neat.
And it still came down to it was close at the very end. I had to win at least, I think, third in the 10th round, and I ended up splitting second, third
Yeah.
on sheepdog.
Oh, really?
Big old blow.
Yeah.
I ended up splitting second, third in the round, won the all around by like $3,000,
That's pretty cool.
and had won 9,000 in the bull riding that year.
Yeah.
It's 7 rodeos, so
That's amazing.
yeah, it worked out.
What do you think about Stetson and the whole Wright family?
Stetson rides phenomenal.
That's crazy to watch, isn't it?
He just rides great, and I knew Cody really well. They used to stay at my house. I mean, they stayed at my house during some of the Billings rodeos when them boys were young, you
Yeah.
know. So, I really like Stetson and Sheree, or I mean, I really like Cody and Sheree.
Yeah.
Cody's wife Sheree, and I think they did a phenomenal job raising them kids. And that Stetson, I was down at the NFR doing some stuff with Rocky Mountain Elk, and they had a tour, and it was when one of his brothers like won the first 3 rounds or whatever. And Stetson was young, like he's maybe 14, 15 years old, And they were doing some interviews after the rodeo up there. I don't know what they call it. That new little area above where they run the stock in, Thomas and Mack.
Oh, at the end of the tunnel there?
Well, up above,
Yeah.
I can't remember. It's not the shoe, but some area. Maybe it is a shoe.
The Cox Pavilion.
Cox Pavilion.
Yeah.
So we were up there. I was up there with this tour, and I saw the 2 younger boys, who would have been Stetson and Statler,
Yeah.
were standing there watching their brother do an interview, and just a few of the, I was like hosting a tour. So I walked over to visit them guys, and a few of the people with the tour come over, and I just introduced them to Cody's 2 younger boys.
Mm-hmm.
And that Stetson, he just really impressed me. Like, he was very mature, very well spoken, stepped up and started talking with these people, and he was young, and just, and that's one thing I see, I watch Rod's boys. That Dawson Hay, the first time I saw him do an interview on TV, just blew me away.
Yeah.
Because I've known Dawson his whole life, and just how polished, how well spoken, what a great job he did.
Mm-hmm.
That's the sport. That is this future of our sport.
Yeah.
And watching Stetson when he was 14 years old or whatever, just walk up to a group of people that are there to enjoy the rodeo and just talk to them and answer questions and represent the sport.
Yep.
And he just did a phenomenal job.
Yep.
And that has nothing to do with his riding ability and to watch how he handles himself, how he carries himself. Putting his riding ability aside, people like that are good for the sport of rodeo.
Yep.
Trevor Brazil's another one. I think the reason Trevor was so great wasn't the 26 gold buckles, but it was the person he was and how he represented our sport.
Yep. And how they respect the sport, and how they know the history of the sport,
Yep.
and how they respect the history of the sport.
Yeah.
Just like you talked about to start with.
Yeah.
Yep.
And as long as we have young people coming up in the sport that will fill them shoes, the sport's in good hands. And I think our sport, and I'm not involved in other sports, but looking at the young people coming up in our sport compared to some of the other sports, I think the sport of rodeo is in good hands.
Yep.
And will do well.
It's awesome. Man, thank you for coming.
Yep.
Appreciate it.